Hello, I'm Steve, I'm a psychotherapist, and in today's video I'm going to talk about a really common problem that many people with social anxiety struggle with, which is internal focus of attention. So if ever there's times where we felt in a social situation where we've been very stuck in our own head, how am I coming across, I feel anxious, are other people going to notice that, are people judging me? We can be very much kind of in our own head, in our own body, in those social situations. So if you struggle with any of those kind of symptoms, then this is the video for you. So when we talk about internal focus of attention, we're describing what happens when our attention is turned inwardly on our thoughts, on our feelings, on our physical sensations. We can find ourselves analysing our thoughts and how we're coming across. Are we saying it the right way? Are we saying it, what are people thinking about the way I'm saying it? Is it coming across correctly? I might find myself kind of being quite worried about what other people maybe are thinking about us and whether what I'm saying or how I'm behaving is being judged by other people. We can also pay a lot of attention to our physical sensations, like noticing maybe my heart beating faster in a social situation, or maybe feeling a little bit sort of shaky or uncomfortable, or my hands trembling. It's like having a magnifying glass sort of pointed towards you and you're kind of ignoring everything else. So for many of you, you might be wondering, well, why does this happen when I'm feeling kind of socially anxious? It's really common for many people who struggle with social anxiety to have these underlying themes or fears of embarrassment or maybe rejection from peers, people around us. And so this internal focus of attention is really common because it's sort of a part of our brain that's trying to scan and survey any potential threats. It's a way of kind of trying to protect you. So some of the common effects of this internal focus of attention that makes it problematic is that when we're drawing our attention to our anxious symptoms, like maybe feeling a little bit shaky or feeling a bit like a heart beating faster, by drawing more attention to them, we then tend to feel them worse. They feel more impactful. They feel more difficult to deal with. We can also find that we might be, because we're so much in our own mind, in our own head, and our own body, we find that we might be missing certain social cues around us. So missing certain sort of, glances or look or certain conversation parts, which then means that we're not able to engage in those conversations maybe as easily because we're kind of distracted by being stuck in our own minds, and we might miss opportunities to have conversation or discuss certain points that have been mentioned. So then that makes us feel even more uncomfortable because we're kind of in a conversation and we don't really feel very present and engaged with it. Another thing we can find ourselves doing is sometimes misinterpreting sort of, maybe cues. So when someone looks at us, our mind kind of goes, they're staring at you, they're looking at you, they're judging you, when that might not be any of those kind of cases. Then they're not doing that. But in our minds, we maybe as that narrative has kind of started to form, and then it starts to kind of digest that and go over that in our minds. Or we might find that we have made some assumptions. So I had a client, for example, who would often put their hood up and head down, walking through, a town centre, and in their mind they were feeling that everyone was staring at them, everyone was looking at them and judging them, and it was really difficult and really overwhelming for them. So that made them kind of go a lot more into themselves, put their head down even further, or maybe wear more layers and things like that, just trying to take any attention they could, away from themselves. But actually, in reality, when we did some experiments around that, where we had to pick his head up and look around a little bit more, and walk through town, head up, looking around at what's going on around, how people are reacting. It was really interesting. He was able to see that actually nobody paid really attention to him. People were on their phones and they're doing their own thing and going through their own lives. It was really surprising for him to see that actually there wasn't any attention on him. Nobody was really staring at him. But it just showed how that internal focus of attention was really hindering him and affecting him day in, day out, when actually none of those things were kind of happening. So again, we can see this kind of protective part of our brain doing this for us, but actually it's not always very helpful for us. So we often see this really vicious cycle of sort of the more you focus inward, the more anxious you tend to feel, and the harder it makes it to create sort of social connections. And when we're not getting those social connections, it creates lots of worry and then makes us focus inward again. So let's talk about how we can break this cycle. So one thing we do in my sessions with people is really focus on trying to shift that attention outwardly. So trying to reduce that inward focus of attention and moving ourselves to be more present in the environment that we're in, and really paying attention to things around us. So a great practice of this could be really observing your environment. So when you're going for a walk, or maybe in a meeting, Another thing that's really helpful to do is really pay attention when you're in communication with somebody or there's somebody else in the room with you, is to really just pay attention to their expression and their tone of voice and their non-verbal kind of communication. What are they trying to communicate to you? So really, again, just paying attention to them and that conversation. Again, being present in the moment and bringing our attention outwardly towards the person we're speaking to. It's really helpful to become very mindful of when you're finding yourself going internal. So, noticing when that focus of attention going inward and trying to spot that and trying to bring it outward. So that takes a bit of practice. It is a bit of a skill. So just really kind of catching ourselves when we're doing it and then bringing the attention outward is really helpful. And doing those kind of couple of methods that I mentioned just then can be a really helpful practice to do. So maybe have a go at that, day to day, practicing it as often as you feel able to, but especially maybe in situations where you find it really difficult. Something that's very common is that we can find ourselves distorting the information around us. And so we can leave maybe a social situation feeling like it went terribly wrong and I came across in a really bad way and they're not going to like me, and all various kind of negative thought patterns that we can find ourselves in. And that can become a kind of quite a habitual kind of way of thinking. So one thing we really want to explore, and I have other videos on this and how we reframe our thoughts. It's a really common and useful CBT approach. And I guess when you're going into a social situation and we're moving our attention outwardly, also just take note of things that have gone well. Pay attention to maybe some positive things out of the conversation that you sort of managed to do there, and credit yourself for noticing a little bit more around you and what was going on there, and practicing this skill. It's all part of stepping stones in moving forward. So if you're able to practice this, make sure you give yourself credit for doing that. It's really positive. By helping our brain realize that these situations are manageable and they're not threatening, then we're rewiring the brain here. So this is really helpful. So this is why exposure work around facing our fears and putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations in small steps is really helpful for helping our brain rewire that and build our self-confidence. So that's it for today's video. I hope you found that helpful. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the video, or make a comment if there's anything that we've talked about today that you find helpful, you've had a go at and you've used and you found it useful. Feel free to share that. It's really encouraging for other people to see progress, and we're all in this together. We all want to help each other as a community. So feel free to give any words of encouragement to other people around you. Until my next video, you take care. Have a good day.